When I was 15 years old, I saved up $300 and bought a 1965 Ford Falcon. I could not have been more proud. I painted it. I ran errands for my mother. I carried my brother around. That was my independence. It was my everything. And then all of a sudden, it got a terrible smell in it. I cleaned it out, detailed it out, drive it, still had that smell. I would detail it out again. So I started driving around with my windows down and air fresheners and started to deny that smell. But when I would pick up one of my friends, as soon as they got in the car, whoo, Joey, what is that smell? And I just assumed they were overreacting. It certainly didn't smell that bad. They're talking about my car. Then I got a flat tire and I popped the trunk and I pulled the spare out of the tire well, and down in the tire well, I saw this corner of this little paper bag sticking down there. When I pulled it out, I found about 2 pounds of rotting hamburger meat that was destroying my car. Now think about it, I couldn't smell it anymore because it was my car. Now hold that picture in your mind, because that's the closest picture that I can think of for when leaders and sometimes even team members, you ask them to rate their workplace culture. They can't smell everything that everybody else is smelling. Why is that? It's because workplace culture is a reflection of us as leaders, us as team members. So just like I couldn't smell everything because it was my car and it was who I was, it's the same thing comes true for leaders when they think about workplace culture. Now, the gap between what leaders believe workplace culture or what they want it to be and what team members are experiencing is the most expensive gap in businesses today. And almost nobody's measuring it. Now, here's why I know that leaders are getting it wrong. The first sign is when I ask leaders to rate their workplace culture, just off the cuff, just rate your culture. And then we walk through what a magnetic culture looks like and kind of compare it to maybe what's going on in their organization. And then I ask them to re-rate their workplace culture. Almost all of those leaders lower their original assessment of their workplace culture. And the second big telling fact, the data, when you do culture surveys from companies from top to bottom and you compile the leadership answers to the workforce, to the team members, there's always a gap. And the leaders have always rated workplace culture higher than the team members are reporting their experience. And when you think about that, the first thing that comes to mind is, are the leaders lying? Are they trying to deceive us? In my experience, hardly ever, never. You see, I was a CEO and I lived in that blind spot. I had that blind spot. When we first started doing our culture surveys, I rated our culture way up here, but we had areas in our workplace that were actually toxic and team member experiences were way down here. So it's not about being dishonest. It is about a lack of an awareness. And that's actually even more dangerous when you think about it. You see, leaders are rating culture based on their intentions. They're rating culture based on their aspirations, what they want culture to be, and not on the team members' experiences. And so that's why you have that gap. It's just like my Ford Falcon. I couldn't be objective about what smelled. And leaders have a hard time being objective about what smells in their workplace culture. I want to be completely honest here, because some leaders, the gap is so large that you could almost say they're grossly negligent, because their self-awareness is so bad and they're so disconnected from what team members are really experiencing. Now, here's what I know about workplace culture after decades of leading, working with teams, and studying workplace culture. Workplace culture never rises to your level of your aspiration, the way you see it, the way you want it to be. It does rise to the level of behaviors that you're intentional with, and then it falls to the level of behaviors that you tolerate. And that fall continues at a certain speed depending on how disconnected leaders are from team members' experience, which is exactly why I call culture the soul of your organization. It is who you really are. Maybe not with your best suit on, but when you wake up in the morning, bad breath and all, the soul of your organization is who you really are. Every conversation, every decision, every action, how every team member feels, all wrapped up into one big ball. And that big ball of culture does one or two things. It either pulls you down and slows your organization down, or it lifts your organization up toward high performance. Here's something else that we learned from the gap, other than that leaders get it wrong. And again, they're not being deceptive. They're looking at workplace culture based on their intentions, and they have good intentions. But here's what we can learn. When the gap is smaller, it tells me that leaders are more connected to the team members' experience. It's usually a sign that they're getting confidential feedback. It's a sign sometimes that they're taking workplace surveys to keep their finger on the pulse. They are working to close that gap and raise the level of workplace culture. And the larger the gap tells us how disconnected that leadership team is, and that they're not operating in a reality of what their team members are experiencing. Both gaps are fixable. Both gaps can be better, but you can't fix what you can't smell. So let's dive into the nose of this. In other words, when I ask leaders what their top priorities are, it's usually one of three things: growth, client service, profitability. Those are the three I hear over and over again. And that, my friend, is what keeps us from being able to smell what's really going on with our team member experiences. Now, all three of those are reasonable. It makes sense in business, right? But here are the consequences of that. When one of those three things is the top priority, when the rubber hits the road, when things get rough, this happens every time. People come in last. This is what leads to the epidemic we have of burnout, of lack of purpose and meaning, of disengagement, of turnover. This is what triggers those things, because people come in last. When I took over as CEO of our company, one of the first things we did is make people our first priority, that having a people-first culture would be the number one priority. And we would make clients our number two priority, because they're so interconnected. And growth and profitability would be the results of getting those things right. But it would always start with people first. Here's what happened. Over the next 10 years, we grew exponentially, organically, over 500%. And it was all about letting people lead the way, prioritizing people. And the growth and the profitability, the client service were all a result of our people knowing that we valued them. And when they felt valued, they became valuable. Now let's sit back and slow down just for a moment, because when I say people first, a glaze comes over a lot of leaders' eyes, because there's lots of assumptions and beliefs that come with that. A lot of people immediately start thinking about, I've got no control, I can't fire anybody, there's no urgency about anything, no accountability, you can't give critical feedback. All of those are very common myths that are very untrue. And I am, over the next few weeks, going to share with you and bust open each and every one of those myths. We'll break them apart together. But I want to be very clear, that's not what people first culture is about. It's not about bringing your pet to work. It's not about blue jeans on Friday or being a remote on Friday. All of those things, not bad in themselves, but that is not what people first culture really is. Here's what it really looks like. It is a workplace culture. It is an environment where you feel safe. You have a strong sense of belonging. It is an environment where people can thrive. They can take risks. They can reach and stretch for their full potential. It is an environment where leaders are connected. They know their team members. Their team members know them. They demonstrate that they care. It is an environment where leadership leads with trust first. And accountability is very high, because team members hold each other accountable. And at the same time, when team members need help, they elevate each other, because in a people-first culture, we is bigger than me. The thing about people-first culture, you can always look at leadership and tell they know it's not about a title. It's about elevating those that you're responsible for. It's about understanding understanding your people and investing in them and helping them be successful. People first culture always provides the team members influence in how, when, and where they work, how they integrate their personal lives and their careers. It's unique for each and every individual. And overall, in a people first culture, you can tell people are leaning in because they're building something bigger than themselves. I used to always say one team, one direction. And from all of that, in a people first culture, there's a lot of positive energy, magnetic energy that leads to that discretionary effort, that leads to people leaning in and being engaged. It is a magnet for more talent. It's a magnet for more clients. It's a magnet for growth. That's the power of a people first culture. If you're watching this as a team member, maybe you're just beginning your leadership journey, you got a leadership opportunity in the future, but you're not truly leading at this point. This is really important for you to understand. That gap in where the leaders see culture and your experience, that is your experience. Own that, embrace it. That is reality. And what I've learned is that culture, when it gets better, it's one conversation at a time. And many times it's team members with courage that understand that not everything that smells is being smelled by the leadership. And they have that strong voice to point that out in respectful ways. But never shy away from what you're experiencing and own that and have the right conversations around that. Because workplace culture will determine how far you can go. You need that support. You need that strong sense of belonging, and everyone needs help and sponsorship and advocacy to reach their full potential. And your full potential is too important to stay in a culture where you're not viewed as the most important thing. Now I want to bring this home really quickly. I found rotting hamburger meat in the trunk of my car that was destroying my independence, my everything. And we know today, because of the epidemic of burnout and disengagement and lack of meaning and loneliness and turnover, that workplace culture smell. And so my challenge to you, and my question for leaders especially, but even team members, are you willing to open up that trunk and look inside? Are you willing to really understand what team members are experiencing and what they are really smelling? Because my friend, that's where the real work is. And that's where the real opportunity is to really change your organization and your team and to achieve greatness and high performance. I promise you, if you put people first, you'll have growth, you'll have profitability, you'll have outstanding client service. And always remember that every day we want to meet that challenge to be better.